Hey, this is your Olympic hero, Kurt Angle, and I don't suck, and neither does the Piffles podcast. But anyone who plays the Riders, they suck. Oh, it's true. It's damn true.
Let's go, Rider Nation.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, here we go. It's a feeling now. Get 'em high, get 'em low, 'cause we're dealing now. Everybody's giving it all they got, 'cause we're ready.
Welcome to the Piffles podcast, your Saskatchewan Roughriders fan podcast. Thanks for joining us here for episode 240, Lights Off, because that's exactly what it was for the Riders and their defense against Edmonton, which we'll talk about here on this week's show. Thanks so much for joining us, whether you're watching us on YouTube, on SaskTel Max TV on demand, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you. My name is Alex.
I'm Steve.
And I look forward to defending my podium finish at next year's Stadneck Invitational.
We'll have to talk a little bit about that because I wasn't invited, even though the invite went everywhere. I wasn't personally invited, so I felt slighted, and I didn't go. But I heard Steve
You missed out.
You had one heck of an adventure on a golf hole.
I did. It was everything I wanted and more.
I may
Got
have
my
gotten
money's
third
worth.
place. I may have gotten third place, but Steve is definitely the most honest golfer I've ever played with. and that itself is an amazing feat.
You can give us a follow on X or Twitter, as it's formerly known as, at PifflesPod. I'm at RealAlexD.
You'll find me at Safamod.
And as always, I do not need nor want your pity follows at Greg on Sports.
Of course, Piffles podcast is brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. I think it's time to have an intervention about the Riders' defense. Let's get to the opening kickoff. All right, so the Riders lose to the Elks last Friday night, 36-27, dropping their record below 500 to 6-7. I'll ask you guys, do you want to start with the positives or start with the defense?
Let's get the garbage out of the way first.
All right. Okay.
Let's
start with the Riders' defense, because there was absolutely no D in that defense this past week.
I need a rim shot sound. Why don't I have a rim shot sound on here? I need a soundboard.
Porous. It was bad. The run D especially. Now, I'm going to preface this just by saying that they lost 3 defensive linemen in that game. Anthony Lanier, Miles Brown, and who else got hurt? Nick Daly also got hurt. So they were put in a tough place. We saw this back in the 2013 West Final when Calgary lost both their starting defensive tackles. We knew Corey Sheets was going to run all over them, and they did. And this is kind of what happened in this Edmonton game. The Riders lost their defensive line, and the run D just collapsed to the point where, it was 270 yards rushing that they allowed. 270. You don't see that in pro football. You see that in college ranks. You very rarely see that, especially in the CFL. And the worst part about it was that you knew it was coming. Going into the game, we knew they were going to run the ball a lot, and they could not stop it. So to me, that was the biggest frustrating part of Friday night's game.
I knew we were in trouble when Micah Johnson was lining up as a defensive end. And I'm like, well, that's a wrinkle. And then you started realizing, holy crap, where's our depth? Like, where's the rotation? Like, there's no bodies left. It was rough. Like, it was a bad situation, especially on that run side.
I'm torn on whether or not we can blame injury or just bad planning, because we saw last week Winnipeg ran up and down the field on us. They also passed up and down the field and kicked up and down the. Well, they didn't kick anything at all.
They didn't kick anything.
Yeah, like I realize that we lost half our defensive line to injuries in this game, but at what point do we look at it and go, you know what, this isn't the players, this is 100% the scheme, because there's no way they should be allowing that kind of run game after game. There's too much talent there for that to be an issue.
Yeah. This is where I normally defend Jason Shivers and his defense, and I have for the last couple of years. I thought they've been a very strong suit for the team. I don't know what changed from the first half of the year, because they were the reason the Riders were in games in the first half of this season, and something happened, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just because Roland Milligan got hurt, but the rest of the defense has suffered since then, and it's been absolutely atrocious lately. And my biggest issue right now is that normally we see growth. They seem to be regressing right now, and that's frustrating to see. When you see guys like Nick Marshall, who's supposed to be our best defensive back, when you see Jeremy Clark, who had such a good year last year, getting picked on continually and getting beat all game long, that's frustrating. They're not getting better. And there's no adjustments. There's no halftime adjustments from Jason Shivers' defense. He's going to run his defense, and that's the scheme he's going to run, no matter what. Other teams will adapt to that, and we've seen that. But nothing changes on the Riders' defense. And to me, that's the biggest frustrating thing, is we know they're going to run against them, and you're having Micah Tights try to spy a quarterback out wide. I like Micah Tights, but he's not fast enough to be able to look after Trey Ford. He just can't do it. And then he got lost in the wash of the bodies at the line of scrimmage, and he just couldn't keep up. Larry Dean couldn't keep up. Like, it was just awful. And I'm not happy with this defense right now, because it was the strong suit, and it should be the strong suit of this team, especially when you look at the Riders' offense and they're down to their third string quarterback. The defense should be keeping them in games. And right now, they're losing games because of this defense.
You look back 6 weeks ago, and we were sitting there talking about, not even 6 weeks after the Labor Day, we were sitting there talking about how this is a championship quality defense, and it was the defense that was keeping us in games week after week after week. And now finally our offense is starting to click with some semblance of regularity, and our defense has decided to crap the bed. And what scares me is this is the guy that Rider Nation was calling to replace Dickenson as head coach. Yeah, I think we all did it at some point.
I was one of them.
But can you imagine, he's already not making adjustments with the defense. Imagine the entire team making no adjustments. I mean, we saw that in the Banjo Bowl, but imagine that constantly. I'm off that train 100%.
Like, Jason Shivers is not Herman Boone with his 6 plays and then just like Novocaine, it's going to work eventually. We're not in Remember the Titans. Like, at some point, and maybe, yeah, that's part of the reason why our run defense suffered, because, yeah, they were trying to spy. At least they attempted to spy Trey Ford, but that let Brown run up and down all over them. Like, they were not prepared to handle, okay, if we can keep Ford in check, what are we going to do about Brown? It was a poor scheme the entire game, and you're right, they did not fix it going into half. And it was bad.
And it was just constant chunk after chunk. Like, normally when I see a running back in the stats and I look and I see 175 yards rushing, I automatically take away his longest run and then average it out from there. Because usually you break a pretty long one when you have 175 yards rushing. His longest run was 35. So if you take that away, he still had, 17 or 18 carries for 140 yards. So he's getting huge chunks time after time after time on average. And that's what killed the Riders. Like, they just could not stop it. When they needed to get a stop, they couldn't do it. And they couldn't get the offense back up on the field. And they needed the offense on the field because the offense was moving okay. I mean, they were put in a really bad spot at the very end of the game with the ball on the 4-yard line, and then getting the safety to pretty much end the game. But at least, I don't know, like I don't know what to say about this defense right now because I don't trust them. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt against Winnipeg in the second game in the Banjo Bowl because, one, they very rarely show up for that game lately anyway. And against BC the week before, they were good until the fourth quarter when they just got absolutely ripped apart. But it's been a really bad month for that defense, and I hope there's some sort of changes. And I don't trust that there will be.
I just don't know. Like, we seem to be backsliding, like similar to what happened last year. Like, look at the penalties they're taking too. Like, I screamed aloud "why" when we took that unnecessary roughness on that kick on that out of bounds immediately after they did to us. Like, you had to know, and that was such a stupid, selfish penalty at a time when they couldn't afford to do it. I don't understand how this team is just regressing at a faster pace as every game comes along.
The frustrating part about
now watch them blow out the Redblacks this week, and everyone's going to be woo.
Yeah.
the frustrating
Back
part
on the
about
parade
that
route.
penalty was that if you take that penalty off the board, that safety doesn't happen. Suddenly we're starting that drive from the 20, not the 5. And it's a completely different ball game. And these were the mistakes that we were making last year. And to see them starting to really rear their ugly head at basically the same spot of the season as last year is, to me, why Dickenson needed to go in the offseason. And why he needed to go 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. He saved his job with the BC win and the Labor Day win. We know we're stuck with him for the remainder of this season. But what do you expect at this point? He held them as long as he could, but there's clear issues with penalties, with regression, with all these things, and we're seeing it in back-to-back seasons.
And the penalty part is really bugging me too because they were so good at the beginning of the year. I gave Craig Dickenson props because the discipline seemed to be there. I don't know what happened, but it's not there anymore, and it's starting to cost them. Hopefully they can tidy that up because I feel that's something that you can tidy up a lot easier than schematics and stuff like that, right? But they keep their own worst enemy is themselves. It always has been, and they can't stay out of their own way, and it's starting to cost them games. And now all of a sudden, I mean, everybody's talking about how Edmonton's won 4 of 5, and now they're, fighting for a playoff spot. The Riders are still 3 games up on them. And as of right now, 2.5 essentially games up on Calgary with 1 game against them next week. So the Riders are still sitting in a good spot when we're talking about playoffs, but it's the fact that they're trending downwards and taking steps back. That's where I'm sensing a lot of the frustration in Riderville right now, is that it's just so inconsistent. And I wrote the article, and we've said it on this show before. The inconsistencies remind me so much of the Roy Shivers and Danny Barrett era. The only difference is they started with a horrible team and got better, leading the team basically to a couple plays away from a Grey Cup and a couple players away from a Grey Cup a following year. Whereas this regime started out with a pretty good team and have regressed each of the last few years. So it's frustrating watching the defense just suck lately, because they're supposed to be the best part of this team. And there should be no worries when you look on paper, even with the depth, even with the injuries that they have the guys there that can play. They have really good depth, but I don't know.
I got to give Washington props for his first game as a Rider. He was all over that field and looked like he cared to be out there. Like, he played very, very well, especially on that defense.
Well, he was about the only one on defense that did. I started thinking about this, and somebody mentioned it was, I think it was on Rider Fans on the fan forum there, about the lack of tackling from the Riders defense. And they singled out Nick Marshall and Jeremy Clark and Deontay Williams as well on that. And it started making me think, after they lost Roland Milligan and Jaden Dahlke specifically, in the defensive backfield, they're soft right now. They're afraid to make hits. I saw Jackson Ford jump in there on a run stuff and get right in the middle of it. And I love that. I love seeing safeties get in the middle of it. I love seeing cornerbacks, stop the running and just get into it. Use your arms to tackle. These little shoulder tackles that you're trying for that big hit, guys bounce off that. And that needs to change. And that's not just a Rider problem. That's a fundamental problem across football. You see it in the NFL as well. You see it everywhere in the CFL. Guys are going for the big shoulder tackle. But you know what works? Just tackling the guy, just using your arms and wrapping him up and bringing him down. And I wish we'd see more of that. But it just shows me that these guys are afraid to actually get in there and make contact. And they just look scared. When there's a receiver that has the ball and they're running at them, or the running back is running at them, they look scared. And you can't have a defense that plays that way. And that's the way they look right now, at least over the last few games.
Time to go with the rolling donut. Yeah, you're right. Like I pointed out in the Banjo Bowl, Nick Marshall tried to shoulder check a guy running away from him. You're never going to take a guy down that way. It's fundamental tackling. And I understand lack of padded practices, blah, blah, blah. You hear it all the time that they aren't practicing tackling drills anymore. At the pro level, these guys should know how to tackle by now. Well, it's obviously it's not working. Well, at least for the Riders, you look like a team like BC. That first game we played against them, anytime a Rider player caught the ball, he was tackled immediately. It wasn't a shoulder check. It wasn't anything like that. It was a legit tackle. We need to go back to basics before we can get better, it seems.
The one player that frustrates me the most, we expect this from Nick Marshall at this point. He's been doing it for years. But the guy that bugs me the most is Deontay Williams. It's a guy who made his bread and butter, made the team off making tackles on special teams and every opportunity he had in the preseason. And even the first week or two he was on the field. And then all of a sudden he's gone to the Nick Marshall school of tackling and it's fallen apart. To me, that's the problem. Is it's not just one guy. It's not just here or there. It is across the board. And that's coaching. That comes down to coaching. There is no other question at this point. How they're not being ripped apart on the sidelines every time they do one of those stupid shoulder tackles that doesn't work is beyond me. Shivers needs to be in their ear. The linebacking coaches need to be in their ear. The DB coach, everybody. They should be yelled at like Office Space 6 times by the time they get to the bench about their TPS reports. This is what they need to be doing. And it's absurd that it's now 14, 15 games into the year and we're still having the same complaints.
All right, well, let's switch gears here. Let's start talking about a few of the positives anyway, at least on offense. And that's where we saw it, is the continued progression of Jake Dolegala. I don't think there's much of an issue with him going forward. I like the way that he's progressed over the last, I mean, basically taken over from Mason Fine, to the point where when Trevor Harris comes back, I know Harris is going to get his spot back, but Dolegala's kind of earned that. And I just like with, a shoddy at best at times offensive line, Dolegala's hung in there pretty well. And he's made some really good throws. The O-line has improved throughout the year and has given him time to be able to make those reads and make those throws. And it just feels like there's just something about Jake Dolegala. He has the it factor of being a CFL quarterback. I think he's starting to figure it out. And if it's not here, he might be starting somewhere next year. This guy has it. And I like seeing that progression, and it's been great seeing that. And I think we finally, for the first time in, a decade or more, almost 2 decades, we have an in-house developed quarterback. And it was a guy that was scouted by them as well, too. You can go back to Darian Durant and say he was an in-house developed quarterback. He also came from the Ottawa Redblacks negotiation list, or sorry, Renegades at the time. He was
I thought we
included.
got him from Hamilton. We got him
Was it
from Hamilton.
Yeah, it was
We got him from Hamilton because we got him and Getzlaff in the same.
That was the
deal.
Getzlaff trade, yeah, where it was actually
greatest-
for Durant, but Getzlaff was the throw-in.
Yeah,
right. But
greatest trade in CFL history.
Again,
That
someone
didn't
that
involve a kicker.
someone that was traded to the Riders, not found by the Riders. But they finally did it, and I love this. They got to find a way to keep him next year anyway.
who's the last one? Drew Willie?
Yeah, maybe. I guess that one
I'm trying
worked
to
out
think.
great.
Well, yeah, not.
It might be Ron Lancaster.
He came from Ottawa.
And yeah,
he came from
I know.
Ottawa,
I
yeah.
realized he also wasn't, but we're going back that far.
Yeah.
John Huffman.
I think it's great
There we go.
that but that also just goes to show that the scouts have done a good job, and I think the team has talent all over the board. But finding that quarterback has been a real good one for the Riders.
I think the good news is I don't think there shouldn't be a rush to anoint him as the starter. Look what happened. Oh, I hope we've learned from the Cody Fajardo experience that a guy in his rookie starting phase can throw a lot of teams off. Once they get a bunch of film on him, that all changes.
Dustin Crump.
So, yeah.
Way to
I
jinx
don't
us this week, Alex.
I know there's going to be people that are going to be even when Trevor comes back, it's going to be time to Harris is old, Harris is this, Harris is that. It's Jake's team now. Maybe I wouldn't be too quick to move on from Trevor Harris just in case. So yeah, Jake has shown himself to be really good. I think he's going to have a very good career, and I hope it's with the Riders, but I wouldn't be so quick to throw Trevor Harris out the door yet.
One thing I've noticed about the Riders offense, and of course they have Tevin Jones, you have Sam Emilus, you have Sean Bain Jr., all guys that have kind of really popped out of nowhere to show up this year and be leaders, close to the lead in yards and receptions. Ever since Kean Schaefer-Baker came back from injury, they haven't really done much with him. And I'm surprised by that. I thought he'd be a focal point for this offense, whether it was on jet sweeps, whether it was long balls trying to get him in the deep passing game, crossers, anything. Are you guys surprised that we haven't seen much out of Kean Schaefer-Baker yet this year?
I think it's a timing issue. It's a chemistry issue. Like Jake has tried to hit him on a few passes, and they just seem to be off a step. I can think of the last 2-3 games. There was 2 balls in the end zone that both were behind KSB, and I don't know if KSB was early, Jake was late, or what, but they just seem to be having that trouble finding that chemistry to where if they get it, they're going to be a very good pairing.
To me, I think it's more he has faith in that connection already with Bain and with Tevin Jones and especially with Sam Emilus. There seems to be a clear camaraderie there on the field. I don't know so much that it's a lack of connection with KSB. It's more he's already been working with the other guys. He trusts them, and that's where he's going. And it seems to me with this offense as well, there is not a lot of play over the middle. If you look back to the last game, most of those passes were those, outside the numbers out passes. He doesn't do a lot over the middle, and that's where KSB's bread and butter is. So I think it's a combination of scheme and trust in the other guys already. If they ever do get it together, what a great weapon to have on an already talented arsenal, though.
I'm sure they'll get it at some point. I'm hoping it's this week against Ottawa. We'll talk a little bit about that when we look at the game preview. Now, after the game, Riders lose. Craig Dickenson, they asked him post game. Craig, you're already kind of shaking your head a little bit. His post game comments.
I need to work on a Dickie impression because some of these quotes they need to be actually heard in his voice. Because why?
The guys need to have a good sleep, get up in the morning, and have a good breakfast. What?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad.
That's gonna get them ready to go against Ottawa. Having a good breakfast after you lose at home when you're favored. Okay. All right, Dickie. But it's the words that he's using, though. He's saying a lot of coach things. We're going to look we're going to watch the film. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Most coaches say we're going to make the changes needed. It's things like, hopefully we'll grow. We'll try to make corrections. No. Don't try to make corrections. Make the corrections. And I'm noticing it a lot more this week. People are angry at Craig Dickenson and they want him gone. And I mean, the time has passed. They're not going to. It's way too late in the year now. Even if they free fall, you just whatever, you ride it out. It just, I don't know. It's just it's lack of leadership to me by just saying, yeah, the guys will go in there and I trust that they'll make the corrections. Well, you too. You're going to have to make the corrections too. You're going to have to get them to make the corrections. And I'm not seeing much onus on the coach, which to me, any good coach will take. And it was just quote after quote after quote this post game that was just, I rolled my eyes and I was like, okay, Craig, like just stop talking, please. Just stop asking them questions, reporters, and just move on.
Ken Miller that you order on Wish. I don't think there's been a comparison I've made that is so apropos. He wants to be that good guy. He wants to be loved. He just is not what you want. He's a good coach, not a good head coach, unfortunately. The players do love him. Like any player I've talked to behind the scenes likes Craig as a man.
Great guy.
As a coach, I don't think the respect's there, unfortunately. I like, what is he trying to say? Like, players are better than last year. The coaching staff is better than last year. I've gotten better than I was last year. Yeah, you better, because you sucked last year. It was all bad. Like, you'd be fired if you were as good as you were last year already.
I loved how he stopped Britton Gray of the Green Zone in the middle of asking that question. When Britton says, looking at last year, this is when the team started to spiral. And he's like, let me stop you right there. And he took offense to that, which good. He should.
He showed some fire.
So did Rider Nation.
He's shown fire though. Like that this is the weird thing. Like, what was that the game a couple weeks back where he was legit pissed on the sidelines, yelling at guys, going nuts. And he showed fire. And then they win that game and it's like, done for the season, guys. Wrap it up. Let's just ride it out till playoffs. Like, what is going on here? Like, carry
honestly,
that.
I'm with you, Alex. My biggest issue is his need to, not need to, but he can't seem to give that definite answer to anything about what they plan to do. You know, the, like you said, the hopefully, the maybe, the we'll try. And a wise man once said, do or do not. There is no try. And he needs to remember that.
That was a puppet, Steve.
There was a man behind the puppet. You shut your face. But legit, he needs to tell us what they are going to do. Tell us not what they plan to do, not what they want to do, not what they hope to do. Be direct. And get that. The players are going to hear that too. They're going to hear your coach saying, yeah, we'll try. Yeah, we're gonna try and work on our penalties. We're gonna try and work on our defense. Well, I guess we'll try. Cool. No. Do you ever hear Mike O'Shea use the words try or hope or plan? Get better. I've fought against that whole Ken Miller on Wish thing, but it's absolutely accurate. There is no better way to describe him, and it's getting awful.
Like, and this is where a play like when he at the end of the game when they popped him out of bounds, took a selfish play, and it's like, what's going to happen out of that? Nothing. That play legit cost you the game. Well, it was one of many that cost you the game, but that definitely put the nail in your coffin right there. And they're out there like no one. There's no discipline. There's no one is scared of Craig Dickenson. No one is scared of crossing him. It is obvious in the way some of these guys play. And I wasn't loud on the. And I wasn't loud, banging the drum for firing Craig Dickenson. It is what it is. But at the same time, he's gotten better, but he's not what this team needs. And yeah, they're going to probably make the playoffs. And yes, they have the talent to maybe have a surprise win here and there. They ain't winning the Grey Cup this year. But what do you do then? Where do you need to be to not renew his contract? And I am scared at 9-9, squeaking in the playoffs, maybe winning a playoff game, maybe even have a tough playoff game is enough to keep him around for another 2-3 years.
I don't know. This is something, and we need more time for this because I could do a whole episode on this. Maybe we'll pencil it in for next week, depending on what the Riders do in Ottawa this week.
If they lose in Ottawa, this podcast is going to be on fire. there's going to be an adult language warning before we start.
Because I can see a situation in which both O'Day and Dickenson are gone. I can see a situation in where O'Day stays and Dickinson's gone. I can see a situation where both of them are gone. And I feel all of them kind of have merit in a way. I
don't see a situation where O'Day's gone. I legit don't see it. Well, there's one, but it's going to be a wild Hail Mary.
Well, we'll save that for another show because, like I said, we could do a full show just on that topic. I know we could. Maybe
there's a long
off the bye week
ahead.
At the end of the year. Yeah, they have the bye week at the end of the year. Maybe that's the time. I don't know. But Eddie Steele, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Former Rider, former Elk as well, stays very engaged with the CFL. Said the Riders are too simple right now, and the team is not mentally tough. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes,
absolutely,
100%. Like that. Like I said, I keep on hyping on that stupid penalty at the end, but that proves it right there. They were trying to get revenge for a play that happened 3 plays ago. That was a dumb play. And instead of doing the smart thing and just running the guy out of the bounds, they had to get their extra lick in for no reason because they have no discipline. And yeah, they're simple because we got carved up by the Elks offense. We were very stagnant on offense against their defense until near the end of the game. Like, I looked up at the stats one time and I'm like, is that what our offense is looking right now? Because it was pretty sad in that first half. Like they're not wrong. He's not wrong. They are simple, and right now they are soft because they're undisciplined.
And you want to know part of the problem, and it goes back to that penalty and penalties in general. They're soft because they have no reason to fear anything on their sidelines. They make a mistake, coach gives them a hug and tells them he loves them. He doesn't bench him. There's no fear of missing a play, missing a game check. The moment Duke Williams last season threw a helmet at a player and played the entire game after that was the moment I knew there was no reason for anybody to fear their actions on the field. There's no consequences coming. What do they have to fear? They're not disappointing grandpa. I just don't get it. I can't understand how he continues to coach in that manner and expect different outcomes.
Want to get to a really quick Trevor Harris update because, of course, they put him up the day after we record last week. And it was after a closed practice, and I was like, okay, are they shutting him down for the year? Is he going to return even sooner after a closed practice? Like, what's going on here? And it was basically just him saying that things are on schedule. He wants to resume on-field activities within, well, now it's the next week. It was 2 weeks back then. But it had me.
I got to admit, when they said they put him up, the DMs going around between you, me, a few other people, like what's wrong with Trevor? Like everyone said he was good. What's going on?
Yeah, was there a setback?
Is there a setback? Is he out for the season? Is he retiring? What is going on? Like the amount of like, oh my god, what is going on was hilarious. And there's like, he's just talking about his recovery. I'm like, oh, wow, that is not fun at all. Like, that's boring.
And that's when I said I think enough media outlets were asking for him for one-on-ones just to get an update on him that they decided, you know what, let's just put him up so we don't have to have him do 5-6 different interviews. He just has to do one scrum basically and get it over with. So I think that's ultimately what happened.
That was the biggest nothing burger I've ever seen. Like, we learned nothing that we hadn't learned over the past week or two, that he was progressing well. He was looking to be on the field soon and expecting to be playing late in the season. We were told that several weeks ago. This press conference was 100%, like you said. Somebody was asking, everybody was asking, and they just said, fine, here, have him for 10 minutes so we can shut y'all up and move on.
I think it was a PR game because they wanted to take the heat off the questions asked about the Banjo Bowl and how this team was going to show up against Edmonton. So I think it was let's put a good story out there and mask a couple of the other things going on. So whatever.
It's hard to ask a Banjo Bowl question to a guy that didn't play in the game.
Well, not to him though, but
yeah.
You know what I mean. Just like let's just instead of putting coach up or putting this guy up or whatever, like it's just, you know what, let's put Trevor up. He'll give good answers. He's always, a treat to talk to. So let's just, everything's good. Everything's hunky dory, right?
You want to put more positive stories out there? Just get more Rob Vanstone infomercials. Right. That'll put out all the positivity we need. Get that man on TV as often as possible and we'll forget about the season.
The voice of the Riders is going to become the face of the Riders.
I hope so. I love Rob. A couple quick signings to mention. The Riders signed global defensive lineman.
Bellinado.
Yeah. And then also he might even play this week with the amount of injuries they have on the D-line. And also an American defensive back, William Poole III, who's played in Georgia. And I looked it up and like he was part of the national championships that allowed 9 points a game. Like this could be a shrewd signing for next year. We've seen this happen where they bring in a DB in September. He doesn't play until late October. And all of a sudden he's Amari Henderson. All of a sudden he's Roland Milligan. And they become, starters and all-stars in this league. So not that I'm trying to put that pressure on William Poole III here, but that's what this is. This is a next year signing. Maybe we see him later in the year, but give me anybody that was on that Georgia defense for the last couple of years. I will take them all because you look at Philadelphia Eagles, their entire D-line is the Georgia D-line.
Yeah,
and it's just sack after sack after sack with that defense. So give me anybody on that defense from that Georgia team. Bring them up here. Just put them all in your neg list and bring them up here.
Where does Baldonado rank as far as quality names that have come up to the CFL? I love hearing his name. I can't pronounce it, but I love to hear it. Just a high quality name.
Baldonado. How is that hard?
Habakkuk.
No,
it's a biblical name.
I was like, there's that's too many B's. Habakkuk. Baldonado. Just I love names that have some like I don't know the right word for it, but just some pizzazz to them.
Extra K's. K words are funny. Cucamonga, Kalamazoo,
It's true.
Simpsons reference. Got it in.
I want to see more. I want to see Baldonado on the field just to hear his name in highlights. That's it.
So more so signings for next year. But like I said, we might see Baldonado this week with all the injuries. We'll talk about the injuries in just a little bit. That's the opening kickoff presented by Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty. That was a long opening kickoff. Let's get to our Churchill Brewing Company odds and end zones here. We didn't talk about it in the opening kickoff. I saved it for this. But when I did mention Roy and Danny and how I put the article out earlier this week that this regime right now reminds me a lot of that Roy and Danny regime, Sheldon asked this, and he said, I know I always had thought that Roy and Danny deserved to be in the Plaza, but is it only because they made the team average instead of being terrible? They only had one season with a winning record. And that's a great question. They did have the 2003 year where they were 11-7, tied for second place, so ended up finishing third based off the tiebreakers. Probably should have beat Edmonton in the West final. Kind of got screwed around in that one. Kent and Keith absolutely dominated that West semifinal against Winnipeg. That was excellent. But it started thinking, because I've always been one that says Roy should be in the Plaza. And then
He's in the Canadian Hall of Fame. How is he not in the Plaza?
Yeah, and he should go in with Danny because they were attached at the hip. And then I started thinking, I'm like, well, maybe Danny shouldn't be in there. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should they be, both of them be in the Plaza?
No. Roy, yes. Danny, no.
No?
No, you don't put mediocrity in the Plaza. Oh, that's not fair, because with 4 Grey Cups in 120 years,
It's a lot of mediocrity.
is our right. But I don't see Danny as anything celebratory. He was a good coach that got us a couple of okay seasons, but he couldn't get us over the hump. Shivers on the other hand, to me, was 100% a big part of why we were able to win in 2007, why we continued on success into the 2009s and the 2010. He built that team for success down the road. You can see his hand all over that 2007. That alone should get him in. Again, 4 Grey Cups in 120 years.
And they put 3 of the teams.
You have your hands on a cup.
3 teams in the Plaza in 1 year.
Yeah.
2010 they put in all 3 Grey Cup teams. I'm torn. I'm torn. That, and maybe it's our era of fandom. Like Roy, 100% deserves to be in. Canadian Football Hall of Famer, absolutely deserves to be in. But you look at the Plaza people as it goes in here, and I'm not saying never, but I'm not saying not now. But I think if you put Roy in, you should put Dan. If you're going to put Danny in, it makes sense to put him in with Roy. If you're going to put him in. But as of right now, I think there's more deserving names. So it's not a no forever. It's just maybe not now. Danny did a lot for the Riders in that era. They just couldn't get over the hump, unfortunately. They had a lot of good guys, and yeah, a lot of it was based on the talent that Roy brought in, but Danny brought them out to play. And yes, there was a lot of 99 seasons. And 99 basically causes Rider fans to convulse in pain whenever someone says it.
It's a swear word. It's offensive to be 9-9. And this year the Riders are on their way to be 9-9. And I think that's a good record for,
from where, especially from where they were last year. Like it shows progress, and that's why I'm thinking we might get stuck with Dickey. This might be Roy and Danny, except it's going to be O'Day and Dickey. Like they might be tied at the hip because this team has shown progression. But does Danny deserve to be in the Plaza? Not now, because there's probably
Not ever.
someone better.
Not ever. His career coaching record was 57, 68, and 1.
And
At what
where
point
is
do
he?
we stop celebrating mediocrity?
Hi,
You
we're
can't.
Rider fans. That's
You
all we
have
do.
to. Yeah, you have to.
No, you don't. I'd rather they put nobody
no
in
one-
than keep putting in
Then
mediocrity.
no one should ever get in.
I'm good with that.
Ever.
My issue with Hall of Fames and Plazas of Honors, things like that, is they've gone from something you had to really earn to, well, let's find 4 names to put in there. It's the Hall of Fames across the sports world have become the halls of pretty good. The Plaza of Honor has become the plaza of you've played here before.
But here's the thing, though. It's not just for players. It's someone who's done something substantial for the team. That's why Paul Hill's in. That's why Steve Mazurik's in. That's like there are people in there that mean a lot to this franchise. It's an honor. It's not a Hall of Fame. It's completely separate.
Matt Dominguez and part of his knees are in the Plaza of Honor.
I was looking. I'm like, there's some players in here. Like Ivan Goodfriend, long time.
Ivan absolutely should be in there.
He deserves it. I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying it's not like you're going to find him in a Hall of Fame anywhere else.
No.
It is people that have meant a lot to this team. For
Well,
a reason.
and this is a thing where longevity means a lot, and not many head coaches get to coach as long as Danny did with one team, with especially having, you know, a below 500 record. So I know he obviously had Roy, you know, backing him the whole way, but that still says something.
You know, it's tough for me because I'm a UCF fan, and Danny Barrett has a connection. He coached with UCF in 2015. So I love the guy. I respect his history, but he never finished above 3rd in the West. 3 and 5 in the playoff. Like, you will never convince me that Danny Barrett belongs in the Plaza of Honor, no matter how hard you try.
You also
I think
said you
my issue. But
you also
would never
said
have
you'd never
pumpkin
have
spice
pumpkin
in
spice.
football.
Yeah, and
yes,
you love it.
but
now.
I did that because I was tired of the fight. I will never tire of the fight of stopping celebrating mediocrity.
Oh, how would we, okay? We're in episode 240. By episode 500, you're leading the Danny Barrett needs to be in the Hall of Fame parade.
Oh, he's gonna be wearing
I'll
a
be sitting
Strepper
here-
jersey and everything.
I'll be sitting here with my sunglasses on, ready to go.
No.
No.
Know what I just realized? Neil Piffles Taylor, who they named the field after, didn't get into the Plaza of Honor until 1993.
It's a long time. It should have been the first one.
It should have been. Then again, some guy named Ron Lancaster and George Reeds and Eagle Keys and Al Ritchie and you know that was the
All
first.
right. Fine. I guess those guys can get in.
From
Okay,
now
well,
on, if
elsewhere
your
around
name
the
is not on the cup, if your name is not on the cup, I don't want to see you in the Plaza of Honor. Let's
So we can take
these
out
celebrations.
Piffles Taylor. We can take out.
Fine.
Who else can
I
we
said
pull?
going forwards. Going forwards. We have now
All right.
celebrated everybody from our history that deserves to be celebrated without a cup. Now it's time to make sure you earn your way into the Plaza.
So there's gonna be no Plaza next year.
God, well, no, there's still a few guys that from the 07 and 2013 years that deserve to go in there. They've won a cup.
Is Mark Guy in there yet?
Oh, now there's a guy that belongs in the Plaza of Honor.
You know what?
Just for
I have
1989 Grey Cup.
I have his number. We should get him on the show. He'd be a good off-season interview, I think. Anyway, let's take a look around the CFL. Here, Toronto clinched first place last week after only 12 games, which is insane to me. With 6 games left for Toronto, when do you start resting guys? Do you start resting guys?
2 games left, maybe rotate them through. You don't want to give guys too much time off, but at the same time, you got to be careful of the injuries. Kelly goes down. What do you do? Like it's tough. It's almost worse for them to actually clinch this early.
To me, at this point, you start looking at You don't rest guys to start games, but the moment a game gets even a little bit out of hand or it's clearly in the bag already, you start rotating guys out. You start getting those
Unless
guys out,
Zach
get those
Larson
back on some
basketball, he's a
meaningful games.
rider right now.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know how the hell he was playing past halftime.
I think you take a look. I think you take a look at nagging injuries that are going on right now. If there's a guy that, if there's a playoff game that would play, but you know what, maybe we can hold him off for a week. You look at it like the NBA. You look at it with roster management, load management, or whatever, the Kawhi Leonard thing. That's how you start doing it. Give a guy a game off here or there. Don't give him multiple games off. Just one at a time, unless it's an injury that, you know, could use an extra week. If it could use an extra week, give them that extra week. You can afford that right now. I'm worried about the team's psyche with all these games meaning literally nothing, and you're playing not to get hurt. That's when things can go bad. I don't think they're programmed that way with Ryan Dinwiddie as their coach and Corey Mace running that defense. But I do wonder about that. But I just think you do more of a load management type thing. And then maybe that game against the Riders at the end of the year where the Riders are going to need that win a heck of a lot more than Toronto. Yeah, you can sit a whole bunch of guys then. That's when you sit your Chad Kelly and your AJ Ouellette and, you know, some of the guys on defense.
How bad is the East Division that Toronto's able to clinch not just a playoff spot, but clinch the division with a third of a season to go?
Yep.
That's both amazing and embarrassing to me.
But really, if it wasn't for BC, Winnipeg probably has the division sewn up as well. Like, then again, Winnipeg lost to Hamilton this week. Like, Winnipeg secured their playoff spot very early as well. Like, it's baffling. This year, you got your tears.
Playoff spot with 6 of 9 teams making it, I understand. You're going to see you guys clinch relatively early. But to clinch your division with a third of a season to go could you imagine that in any other sport? Imagine clinching a division in baseball with 55 games to go. Because that's the equivalent right now. That is how far ahead they are of the rest of their division with a third of a season to go.
As a New England Patriots fan, I saw it.
As a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, I saw the St. Louis Cardinals do that for a good solid 5 years straight because the rest of the NL Central sucked.
As a Jays fan, I'll never see it.
Yeah. But Steve, that kind of leads me into the next question here about how the East is so bad. And this came from Christina Costable, CFL's. She works for the CFL. She's their web and web manager, basically content editor. She said that Ottawa, while they were actually winning that game against BC, are much better than their record indicates. And they were 3-9. Now they're 3-10. My question to you guys, because I don't agree with her at all. Is it possible to be better than your record? Like, are the Riders better than an average team, a 6-7 team? Is Ottawa better than a 3-10 team?
This is why power rankings are the most thing that trigger most sports fans, because your record is who you are.
Thank you.
Your record, kind of to paraphrase Denny Green, we are who they thought they were. Like, your record is who you are. So that's why power rankings are so fun, because people, well, no, they've won this many games and they were in this game. Doesn't matter. You are where you finish. You beat who's in front of you, or you lose to who's in front of you. That's it. There's no games on paper. The games are done on the field. You are who you are. End of story. And yeah, there could be very good teams.
Once too. I think Kesha said that once too. We are who we are.
That is true. Better than Tesher, but I digress.
I didn't hate that halftime show.
I didn't hate it, but I'm just sitting there going, yeah. Like, I'm in this weird spot where I'm sick of seeing Trooper, but Tesher ain't it either. So I don't know where I'm at anymore in the music acts that the Riders bring out.
Tesher, Kim Mitchell, Jess Moskaluk. She's in that middle of the two for age
Don't get me
wise.
wrong, I love Jess Moskaluk. I drive by her house all the time in Rocanville now, but not anything creepy. I should put that out there. But I know where she lives. But that's beside the point because it's a small town and everyone knows where everyone else lives.
Just stop. Just stop talking. You're making it worse.
Just dig up, stupid. Dig up, stupid. But yeah, Jess Moskaluk ain't it either. But no, like it's yes, there's teams with very good talent, but if you can't put it together, you are who you are.
I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate here. I agree that your record is where you are. You are what your record is. If you are a 3-10 team, you're 3-10. You can't argue that point. I can see situations where a 3-10 team might be better than a 5-8 team based on who they've played or injuries at the time, things like that. But at the end of the day, at the end of the season, your record is who you are. But throughout the year, I can kind of see that middle ground of you can be better than your record. But at the end of the day, you can't argue with an 8-10 season or a 3-15 season. That's where you
can argue strength of schedule based on college football. The SEC is different from the Big Ten, different from the Pac-12, whatever. That's fine. The CFL, everyone basically plays each other. Yeah, there is a emphasis on playing in your own division. It still doesn't matter. Like you play everybody, you know everybody. This isn't Bama runs through everyone in the SEC versus Oregon who's beaten the Pac-12. It's not the same. Your record is who you are, especially in a league of 9 teams.
I will say this about Ottawa. They've made strides this year. They're not getting blown out in games, which is a positive. That's a good thing.
Have you seen their fan social media? Because they're ready to burn the building to the ground.
Yeah, yikes. You thought Rider fans were bad on social right now after this loss against Edmonton? Redblacks fans are way more off the deep end. And I've said this many times. Good teams find a way to win. Bad teams find a way to lose. And average teams find a way to do both. What is Ottawa doing? Well, they're not winning. They're losing. And you look at Dustin Crum and their 2 wins with him. They did absolutely nothing for the first 57 minutes of that game against Winnipeg. Then they got a pick 6 and Winnipeg collapsed and Crum had 2 runs. The next game against Calgary, Crum was very good. They scored 43 points, 1 in overtime. That was an exciting game. That was great. That's when you thought you'd start to see the strides. Then everybody figured Dustin Crum out. And they've made no adjustments whatsoever. They've Jason Shivered their offense, where they're not doing anything different than what you know they're going to do. And that's why they haven't really done anything. They're a bad team. If they were an average team, they'd find a way to win a couple of these and get to 5-8 or 6-7. They're a bad team. So I don't think it's possible to be better than your record shows. If you were, you would be. And that's it.
Yeah, basic.
Yeah, something like that. We got to start powering through this. We're getting pretty late in the show here. We do have a couple Regina Thunder tickets to give away this week. Sunday, 1 p.m., Leibel Field. They're playing the Calgary Colts.
Colts pulled off an upset 2 weeks ago against the Winnipeg Rifles. Like they're actually a very good team now.
And
so
the Thunder beat the Rifles last week.
Yes, they did.
In Winnipeg, right? So
yeah.
We'll make it really easy. Retweet this episode, whether you find it on audio, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or wherever you find it, Podbean.
Tag us.
And just find us on social. Hit the like button, hit the repost because it's not retweet anymore. Hit the repost button anywhere and you're automatically entered. And someone will be off to the Thunder game Sunday at 1:00 at Leibel. All right, let's get to the Riders and Redblacks this upcoming Friday, 5:00. Watch which station you're watching this game on which TSN you're watching it on, because there's another game at 7:30. It's the BC at Edmonton game. So there's going to be some overlap, just like there was last week.
I thought they couldn't do that. They didn't have the technology, remember?
No, but there is now. So there might be some overlap. So if you're watching the game on TV, obviously you're probably not flying out there for a Friday at 5:00 game. But watch which TSN has the whole thing and then flips to the other one after. We saw this last week against Edmonton. It's a rushing quarterback. It's Dustin Crum, who teams have figured out and made him stay in the pocket. He can still be dangerous when he runs around a little bit, but I think teams have really forced him to stay in the pocket. Is Jason Shivers going to learn how to do that this week, or is what we saw against Edmonton kind of what we're going to see against Ottawa in terms of defensive schemes?
Dustin Crum isn't Trey Ford. I'm not as concerned about him throwing on us as I was Trey Ford. I'm not even scared of his running abilities like I was for Trey Ford. I think the Riders defense, pending injuries, should be able to keep him in check.
Honestly, Trey Ford is what everybody thought Dustin Crum was 2 months ago, but better. Crum doesn't scare me at all. We were able to handle him pretty well last game. The book is out on him, and he's not as good of an athlete to be able to escape that. Trey Ford can beat you with his legs, whether you plan for it or not. Dustin Crum cannot. And once you've boxed him in, you don't have to worry too much about his arm. Now that I've said that, of course, he's going to throw for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns, and it is what it is. But no part of me is worried about Dustin Crum at quarterback at all.
Which Rider road team shows up? Or is it the road team that shows up? Which Rider team does show up? Is it the one that's going to come out amped like they were against BC and Winnipeg just a few short weeks ago? Or is it going to be the team that was just there to collect a paycheck against Montreal and Winnipeg in the Banjo Bowl that just refused after, giving up one drive and the teams and the opposition scoring right away? Both games, they had their heads down, hanging their heads, going back to the sideline. They knew they lost that game already. Which team shows up this week?
If I knew, I'd probably make more money and I wouldn't have to work, and I'd have a bigger bank account. I know what I hope shows up. I don't know, man. This team on the road is hard to figure out. I want to say the team's going to come out flying, especially Ottawa at home is always usually a safe bet to take the road team anyway. But there's a lot of injuries on that defensive line. I'm a little worried. But
way to ride that fence, Greg. That was the most political answer to a question I've ever heard. I know which one I want. I just don't know which one.
I kept myself from cursing, so because that's what I wanted.
I'm really proud of you.
That's exactly what it's been. That's what this defense has been. So
I'm really proud of you. It's tough watching this defense and not swear. To me, this game is going to tell us exactly how this team feels about Craig Dickenson. They came out flying in those BC and Winnipeg games when the talk started to be about his job. He lit something under their butts and they came out on fire. If this team wants any chance of a legitimate playoff spot or a legitimate run in the playoffs, these are games they have to win. You can't lose to Ottawa and expect to do anything in the playoffs, period. So if they come out flat, to me, this season is over. They can maybe squeak into the playoffs and be somebody's, West semifinal fodder before they go on to the West final. But if they can't beat Ottawa, they have no business going any farther in this season.
After this game, they have a huge road game in BC. And that to me it's not a must win. this game isn't a must win. The game against Calgary in October, that's the must win. But I'm curious if they're looking ahead to BC at, winning a tiebreaker against them and still holding out hope that they can catch them for second place. That's my worry about where they're at. And on paper, they should beat Ottawa. They should. And I have no reason to believe that they won't. But I'm kind of with Greg. I don't know what to expect from them. And that's the frustrating thing, is if I knew they were going to come out strong and by golly, the guys did their best, but they lose, then I'm fine with that. Honestly, I'm fine with that.
Dickie.
Yeah,
Thanks for the by golly, Dickie.
but I'm perfectly okay with that. If they go out there and they give that hard effort and they just get beat by the better team that night, that's great. That's fine. That's sports. There's a winner, there's a loser. But if they come out just not caring, then I don't know how I can trust them the rest of the year. And it's just those questions about last year are going to keep creeping up, and they're going to get asked by the media to Craig Dickenson, and he's going to have to circle around that and get defensive on those all the time.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh,
Did we lose Alex?
We might have lost Alex. But he's not wrong. Dickie's going to come out of this if he can't if they can't pull this off. It's going to be tough. And
I'm having a hard time having actual discussion while we look at that blank stare on Alex's face. He could not have done that better.
No, honest and yeah, true. But also, I'm going to move on. Hopefully, Alex comes back in soon. But you look at the injuries going into this weekend. That defensive line is beat up. Day one, no Lanier, no Daly, no Brown, no Deontay Williams, no Justin Herbin-Reed, no Jamal Morrow. And Alex is officially gone. Oh, he's popping back in here. Ad stage.
And it was Steve that was worried he'd crash out.
Yeah, I know.
Man.
You paused on, and I kind of moved us on to the injuries going on that defensive line in general, but mainly the defensive line. Because as I was just saying, there's no day one, no Lanier, no Daly, no Brown, no Deontay Williams on the defense, no Justin Herbin-Reed, no Morrow. Day two, no Pete Robertson. That's a lot of depth, especially on the defensive line. Where do they go?
Well, that's starting
to Habakkuk Baldonado.
Hey!
This is where he makes his mark.
That starting D-line could be like Corte Moore, Micah Johnson, Charbel DeBeer, and Christian Albright. Outside of
Corte Moore, low key, anytime he's in that game, he is playing very well. He is going to be a starter very quick in this league.
Love him as a rotational guy right now. I don't think he's quite ready to be the main starter in a professional football game. He will be there, and I think he will be there for a long time to come. But if he is lined up as one of your 4 starters and you're going to the global guy you just signed as your 5th defensive lineman, that is terrifying. Somewhere Dustin Crum is sitting there rubbing his hands together thinking, this might be the game I finally get to turn it around.
Is Christmas out too, or did we just not include him on this list?
No, he wasn't on the list.
Okay.
That was from the Riderville official injury report. So,
Christmas could be in here as well. So that's still not ideal, but
no.
Christmas, Johnson, Shivers, and DeBeer are okay. Up the middle. The outside's going to be a gong show.
Still a little terrifying, but slightly better.
Well, we'll see what kind of effort they put in. And, I mean, no team likes to blame injuries, but they have a legitimate beef, at least on the D-line this week, if that's the D-line that we do see, if these guys do miss times. So, obviously, they're flying out a day earlier, which is nice to this game. Maybe a couple of them will be going with them in their game time decisions. So
First time the Riders have been out to Ottawa in what, 3 years, 4 years?
It's been a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, some
Yeah,
of these
last
guys
time-
might be going a little tourist.
Well, last time they practiced on the grass in front of the
That would have been
Parliament.
that was with Chris Jones. That was 2018.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been some time.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the spreads this week for the CFL games, and of course, the Riders at Ottawa is the first one. Riders by 1? Question mark.
Ooh.
1.5.
Riders by 4.
But just so you know, I've got no movement. I just have the opening for some reason. There's no updated lines. 2.5. Riders stock opened up at 2.5. Over under is 44.5. It's a low one.
I'll take the over.
Oh, I would take the over. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care who's playing. If you're giving me 44 points in a CFL game, I'll take the over 100% of the time.
Yeah. 2.5. Oh, the Riders should cover that. They really, really should.
I agree. I'm going Saskatchewan, and I'm going the over.
Yeah, I've got the Riders in this one. If they, like I said before, if you can't win this game, you might as well call off the season because it's going to get ugly from there.
Like, I'll be pissed off if they don't come out pissed off. They need to. So it's not a must win, but they got to show us something here.
It's a
second game against or on Friday night, BC at Edmonton, which all of a sudden looks like it's a pretty good game on paper. With Edmonton on the rise.
Not for the lines.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Probably BC by 2.5.
Oh, I'm going to go BC by 7.5.
8.5.
What?
Over under a 50.5.
Oh yeah, take the
Definitely
over.
still the over.
I don't know.
Can I just say, if I'm any team looking at this schedule right now and I see Edmonton coming up in a game between now and the end of the season or in the playoffs, I'm actually worried. That team is starting to put it together, and if they can squeak into the playoffs somehow,
not making the playoffs.
I want to see it. I want to see them cross over because I don't want to see them take our spot.
So
but it would be funny to see it happen.
Which 3 teams are going to have to tank then, Steve, for them to make the playoffs? Because right now, for them to get a crossover, they have to leapfrog Calgary, Saskatchewan, one of the two, and someone in the East.
Calgary, Hamilton, Ottawa. Although Hamilton is starting to look better than they were 4 weeks out. I don't think it's likely, but I'm sure as hell not giving them a free bingo space like I was.
Oh no, they don't get the
predicted
free bingo
the 4
space,
in a row.
Stop it. They're not making the playoffs. They're essentially 3 games back with 4 games to go, and they need 3 teams to tank. That's not going to happen.
But could you imagine how embarrassing it would be for the CFL if an 0-9 team made the playoffs? Or even worse, if an 0-9 team won the cup? How beautiful would that be?
They love the fact that BC won in 11.
I was going to say, at least we'll stop hearing about 2011 BC.
Yeah. The league loves that.
Right.
They love that stuff. It means you're never out of it. So even if you're a bad team, you're never out of the Grey Cup race.
Unless you're the Ottawa Redblacks.
Well, yeah.
Week 1.
Anyway.
Edmonton to
I
cover.
digress.
BC
I think
to win,
Edmonton's going to cover. That's a big line. That's a big line. So
Edmonton's fourth quarters, the last 2 games, they've outscored their opponents 34-0. And BC was atrocious against Ottawa until the final 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, I think Edmonton covers that spread. I think BC wins, but I think it's a lot closer than 8.5 points.
All right. Montreal at Calgary on Saturday afternoon.
I'm going to say Montreal by 4.5.
I think it's going to be Calgary by 1.5.
Montreal 2.5. Over under a 46.5.
I mean, both these teams are like Montreal's just totally Fajardoing right now. Like they're not in a good place right now. He's lost his confidence again, and we know what happens here firsthand when he loses his confidence. And
Well,
that's
it's not
exactly
that
what's
he's lost.
happening there.
It's not that he's lost his confidence. He's lost the confidence of the guys around him. So he needs to do everything himself, and that just causes havoc. He forgets it's a team game. I actually like Calgary.
I think Calgary's going to win this one.
Give me Montreal and the points. I think they cover.
I hope you're right, Steve. I hope you're
and
right.
You know what the best part about it, if I'm right, Calgary finishes with a sub 500 record, and it will be beautiful. We know it's going to happen this year, but I want it to happen this week. That'll be heaven. We've been waiting for it for so long.
Oh, so long. So very long.
Yeah. Just thinking about how great that is.
I'm just going to look in the distance.
There's no words. There's no words. It's just, that's nice. That's nice. And the final game of the week, Hamilton at Toronto. I'm assuming Toronto is probably like a 9.5 point favorite.
Sorry, I forgot who was playing. Yeah, Toronto by.
Oh, it's on. Oh, it's on repeat. Damn it! There you go. Yeah, Toronto 9.5.
I don't know. Hamilton's playing some really good ball, and it looks like Taylor Powell has figured it out. Almost the same way that, not to the same extent that I think Jake Dolegala has, but he's got Tim White and he's using them, and Tim White's been fantastic over the last little bit. They're using the run game. They found James Butler. All of a sudden, he's doing really well. I don't think Toronto's ready to pull their foot off the gas pedal yet, but I think Hamilton can cover this. I think the Argos win, but Ticats cover.
I think Toronto wins, and I think they cover.
I think Toronto wins. They don't cover, and I know we're late in this episode. Have we found like the new quarterback club of the CFL, like the new young guys coming up?
Possibly with Taylor Powell,
Kelly
and,
Dolegala, yeah, like there's
well, and going into this year, we talked a lot about how there's a quarterback issue overall in football. I think where there's a whole bunch of average quarterbacks, and then there's a handful of elite ones in the NFL, and here in the CFL, there's a couple really good ones, and then a couple average and some bad ones. But these ones at the beginning of the year that we thought were bad, they're starting to turn out. So it's good. It's good for the game. It's good for the CFL. We need guys like Taylor Powell to come out of nowhere from being a third string quarterback. I hope Dustin Crum can be that guy in Ottawa, be a fourth stringer and turn into a viable CFL starter. Jake Dolegala being a third string to start the year, being a CFL starter in his second and third year. Trey Ford, especially being Canadian. Like there's
and maybe we can push, maybe we can go in more depth next week, but it's good to see it's not just retreads constantly like it has been the last couple of years.
Last couple of years, it feels like it's been the same guys since 2010 almost.
Anthony Calvillo went down injured.
Like you look at it, it's Trevor Harris. It was Bo. It was Zach Caleros,
Michael Riley.
Like we had the same, basically 5 of your 9 starters were the same guys for the better part of a decade. Now all of a sudden next season you go into it. I wouldn't be shocked if Powell is starting. I wouldn't be shocked. Well, Trey Ford will be starting. Dolegala will be starting somewhere. Like you're looking all of a sudden at that quarterback change that we've needed forever. And it's guys none of us expected. Because I mean, I don't think any of us looked at our roster and said, you know who's going to start somewhere next year? Jake Dolegala, when he couldn't beat Mason Fine in camp, and all of a sudden, maybe he's the guy. And the only reason Powell's getting the chance is due to injury. I mean, same here, right? It's those guys that are getting their chance are finally stepping up and running with it. some of them like Trey Ford and Powell quite literally running with it. It's good to see, and it's much needed.
Well, hopefully we see some more growth this week from these guys, and we see more good games, because the CFL games have been very entertaining this year. Even some of the bad games have been pretty entertaining, especially at the end. But overall, it's been a very, very good season for the CFL. I think that's going to do it for us this week here on the Piffles Podcast. Of course, Piffles Podcast is brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. Special thanks always go out to Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty and Churchill Brewing Company for their support making the show possible. Thanks to everybody listening, everybody watching on Sass Telemax TV on demand on YouTube. We'll see you next week. This is Tyler Gilbert with Ghost Behind Your Mind.